Alright guys, getting ready to do another video for y'all. As you can see, it's winter time here and we have some snow. So it's time for maintenance. So I've already got my Losi 5 finished up. And I've been working on my MTXL. Okay, got the maintenance done on the Losi already. Wheel bearings, got her all cleaned up, so she's ready for the new season. Still got to get the MTXL finished up. So I'll go over how I do maintenance on the bearings. I have a tool I use to grease the bearings, puts pressure on the grease in the bearings, and so we'll go over that. Also how to take these shields off bearings so you can get some grease, some good grease in there. Okay guys, back to bearing maintenance. I got a couple of these greased already. The tool that I like to use is called the greaser. I picked this up for my helicopters, greasing the bearings on my helicopters. It's a neat tool. I don't think you can get this one anymore, but you can get something similar if you do a search on eBay for bearing greasers or RC bearing greasers. The way this thing works, I've already got a couple of these done. These two I've already put into the greaser. But before you get started, you want to soak your bearings in a solvent. I like to use denatured alcohol for a couple hours, and then pull them out of the solvent, whatever solvent you're using. Use an air gun or whatever to dry them up. Make sure they're dry, and then you can go ahead and use whatever type of grease system that you have. For these shielded bearings, Losi vehicles, from what I've found, have these shields, the non-reusable shields on them, and I'll show you how to take those off. But if you don't want to do that, you can use a system like this. And so what you want to do is go ahead and place that bearing on the top. This is a sleeve in here with grease under it, so as you apply pressure, it pushes the grease up out of the cup into the bearing. Get the bearing on top there, then you start to apply pressure to the cup, which forces grease up. You can see how that grease is starting to come up on the inside of that brace. Once you have it coming up all the way around, you know that grease is inside the bearing and you're good to go. Pull the bearing out, clean it up. We're going to test how well this does here. I'm going to pull this. I pulled the retainer off my other bearings, and that's how I'm going to run it. And so we'll pull this retainer off and just see how well that greased up this bearing. Make sure it's doing a good job. I always like to do a final clean with some denatured alcohol. You can get it at your local hardware store. That's the solvent I use on 90% of my RC jobs. Okay, let's pull this apart and see what happened. The way you want to take these shields off, just get your little screwdriver, and as you can see, these crimp lines in here, you want to press down in the center of the shield at each one of those crimp lines. And I don't mind removing these shields. I just remove one side, grease the bearing up real good, and put each bearing in with the shield I removed facing each other, so that there's still a clean pocket in there. And then once you have those crimped, that will come out of there. Once you have those crimps in, you can just lift that bearing out if you have an X-Acto or a small flat tip. There you go. Alright, as you can see, there's plenty of grease in that bearing. And that's without removing the shield. If you want to just remove the shield, clean your bearings up real good. You can also just grease them up by the old-fashioned method. What I do is put a little grease on my palm. Just same procedure you'd use for wheel bearings on a trailer or your motorhome or whatever it is. And then you take the open side and just kind of grab the grease, pressing it in your palm. That way it pushes it up into the bearing. You can see that's nice and greased now. Clean up the outside the best you can with some alcohol without getting it in the grease. Takes a little finesse, but not too bad to do once you get the hang of it. Now when I go to install these back on my vehicle, what I'm going to do, because these have bearings on both sides, I'm going to take the open side and put it on the inside. Same with the other side. Take the open side, put it on the inside. And when I do that, I'm also going to seal that bearing with some green Loctite. You want to get you some green Loctite. One of the things I found with these, especially on the MTXL, partly on the Losi, is that I found that the axles were actually rolling inside the bearing. And so what I want to do is seal this axle onto the bearing, as well as seal the bearing onto the cup. And so the way I do that, once the bearing's all cleaned up and ready to go, get a little alcohol on this. Take your time, make sure your bearings are clean. Clean and dry. I think that one's good enough. With the plastic cups, I don't necessarily need to use any green Loctite on these because they fit pretty snug. And so what I'm going to do is just press this one in. This shouldn't go anywhere. Get the other bearing ready. Now a couple of these I've already greased, and so all I got to do is remove the shield. Nice thing about using the greaser, if you still have the shields installed, you're not going to get the bearing all gummy again on the outside once you clean them up. Okay, we'll remove the shield on this one. As you can see, that bearing's already nice and greased up. And then again, put the open side to the inside. That one's stubborn. I don't think that's seated yet. There it goes. Now it's seated. Now that that's on there, I'm going to go ahead and clean up my axle with some alcohol. This is where the green Loctite comes into play. I found these starting to wear because they were moving inside the bearing. You can see that, those wear rings. So to prevent that, I'm going to use this green Loctite. This is actually a sleeve retainer. Use very, very little of this stuff. Better get my lunch lady gloves back on again. I'm just going to put a little dab down towards the bottom there and then roll that with my finger. You don't want any of this stuff inside the bearing, and you don't need much. And I'm going to push that into the bearings and do the outside. Now this is a wicking formula, and so again, don't use very much, and you should see it wick into that outer sleeve without getting into the bearing. Little drop. You can see it starting to wick into that area. You can see it go wet all the way around that shaft if the shaft is slipping. Move it out just a little and back in. There you go. Gotta let this set for 24 hours. Clean up the excess. I'm gonna go ahead and put my wheel hub on here just to make sure it stays in the right spot. You don't want to glue this on. Which one is it? There Once it dries, I'll finish tightening that up. But you want to set that aside for 24 hours. Let that green Loctite cure. That should secure the shaft to the inner race of the bearings, and so you don't get that wear that I was getting earlier. Hopefully. I use the same technique on the front axles, and so you just have to rinse and repeat. I've already done these two, so they're good to go. I just have the last front to get done, which I'll do next. And then you also want to check your boots while these are off. I found some bad boots. I'm going to go ahead and I've already loosened this set screw. I'm going to press this piece out, this pin out, and then put my new boots on this dog bone. Press the pin back in, reset the retainer locking screw there, and be good to go. But you want to inspect all this when you have these apart. You can see these are shot. Also, I like to put a little bit of grease in these joints. This one, I'll clean that grease out, put fresh grease in, and then put the cup back on. I've been using zip ties, the small ones, which helps seal up these boots, keeps them from splitting on the end like these have already done. Just from these are still the stock boots. Losi doesn't do anything for those, and so they will split, especially if you try and put them on over these pins. I like to use a little heat. If that set screw is too much, I'll put a little heat on this to loosen that set screw up. That way I'm not stripping the set screw. Anyways, hope this little video helps you guys out. Hope to have a couple more down the road here soon. Got a nitro engine I got to break in, and I've also maybe got something coming in the mail for an unboxing. Anyways, hope this helps someone out there. Thanks for watching.